protesting. They want Marcos out. Tonight, he and his family are under heavy security at Hickam Air Force Base. In the Philippines tonight, President Aquino has picked a cabinet, offered a ceasefire to communist guerrillas, and ordered freedom for some political prisoners. She plans to investigate the wealth Marcos built up in the U.S. Some legislators here aren't surprised.
Let Mr. Marcos come forward and explain how on a $5,000 or $6,000 a year salary he generated $100 million worth of real estate in New York City.
These properties were purchased by the money of the Philippine people, and therefore they are the owners of these properties.
The Aquino government plans to open the Marcos Palace in Manila to the public. Today, the barbed wire outside started coming down. The palace grounds were open briefly, then shut down again as a precaution. Soldiers found some booby traps and explosives inside the palace, apparently left behind by Marcos loyalists before they fled. Wendy?
During the hours the palace was open, Eyewitness News reporter David Jackson joined thousands of Filipinos inside the gates. Right now, David is continuing to follow the drama in Manila. He has been on the story there ever since Marcos resigned. And tonight, David is standing by on the phone with a live report on the latest in the Philippines. David.
Wendy, tonight, just as you mentioned, President Aquino and her staff are now going through the presidential palace, turning up all these items of personal wealth and furniture that the Marcos family, Ferdinand and Imelda, had apparently stockpiled inside their home. It's pretty much what was expected from the critics of Marcos and his regime, because they had believed all along that he had fabulous amounts of wealth inside the palace itself, along with the real estate that they've been trying to track that he owns all over the world. And as you mentioned earlier, that is pretty much what the Aquino administration is going to try and take stock of at first here as they take power. They're also making a broad effort to make peace with a lot of the Marcos cronies that are believed to be still, of course, in and around the Manila area in various jobs of power, various big businesses, and claiming there could be amnesty for many of Marcos's closest allies here. The crowds that we showed you earlier tonight have been driven out of the palace grounds now. Those thousands and thousands of people that went in there primarily because they've never been in there in 20 years have now been asked to leave because of the booby traps that have been found inside the building, and because some of those people are worried that something could happen to the public. They do plan, as you mentioned, to open that back up again on a more selective basis to the public, who of course will probably stream through that palace for years to come. Just curious to see where Ferdinand and Imelda had been living for all these years. The businessmen held a parade also downtown today. They were celebrating the sort of surge in the stock market they had in Manila, and just generally celebrating the fact that President Aquino is now in power and Mr. Marcos is finally out of the country. And that is pretty much spread throughout the business community, not just in Manila, but all over the Philippines. So that is the feeling tonight. It is a sense that things are getting back to normal, but a few official activities like that taking place on the palace grounds, Wendy.
Thank you, David. It's fascinating to see the inside of that palace. And David will continue to file reports for the rest of this week from Manila as the events develop there. There are some people in the United States who have seen a side of Corazon Aquino you may not know about. They're the teachers and former students at Mount St. Vincent College in Riverdale, New York. Aquino was a student there in the late 40s. Her classmates remember her as a hard worker but shy. The Catholic sisters who ran the college saw something more.
You could see then that she has what it takes to, and the great will to do something for the Filipino people.
A deep religious sense, great integrity of character, firm convictions, great compassion.
Aquino returned to the college in 1984 to receive an honorary doctorate in humane letters. Many of her old friends say they saw a change in her, and they knew she had the will to carry out her struggle in the Philippines.
FBI experts say they have unraveled
Marcos left behind.
When the history of the Philippines is known, perhaps we would beat the record of Argentina in magnitude and the kind of torture this country has suffered during the Marcos government.
Good evening, I'm Ted Koppel in Manila, and this is Nightline. Beginning today, things are changing in the Philippines. Just hours ago, the first release of political prisoners since President Aquino took office. We'll hear from a man who spent a quarter of his life in detention. And I'll be talking with President Aquino's chief of staff and her newly appointed prime minister.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Manila, Ted Koppel.
Now, all the campaign promises, all the pledges of reform resonate with new meaning. Corazon Aquino takes her place with Margaret Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, and Golda Meir as one of the very few women ever to be democratically elected chief of state. Now she has the power to go with the visions of a free country that marked her campaign against Ferdinand Marcos. The first symbolic gesture has already been made. Here's Nightline correspondent James Walker.
May I request Mr. Jaime Verdan, one of the released detainees, to say a few words. Jaime.
This is the new Philippines, a place where the Army Chief of Staff is proudly announcing the release of political prisoners, 33 of them today. Jaime Verdan spent the last 2 years in jail for allegedly taking part in a bombing, but he was never charged, never brought to trial. He's one of more than 600 political prisoners now hoping to be released.
My baby has been born and has been raised in prison.
Judy Tacualo has been a prisoner for 4 years.
I was active with the student movement before martial law was imposed as a student leader.
Jaime Serrano was a member of the National Sugar Workers Union. He's also spent 4 years in prison, awaiting trial on a charge of rebellion.
We are banking on Cory's promise that she'll release all political prisoners, no matter the category.
Other events in the new Philippines today, a special mass thanking the Army for overthrowing the Marcos government.
Never, my brothers and sisters, never have I been prouder to be a Filipino. Mabuhay ang Filipino.
Filipino entrepreneurs are cashing in on the new regime with a new souvenir, pieces of barbed wire that used to surround the presidential palace at Malacañang. The palace itself has become Manila's #1 tourist spot.
We only see this in the pictures, but now this is now a reality. We are here. We are very happy. We are so happy.
Thousands continue to gather on the grounds of the palace, which have been partly restricted as government troops search for landmines and booby traps left behind. Officers say they've already found a number of remote-controlled anti-personnel mines among the trees and bushes where crowds had been gathering. But most Filipinos have not been allowed to visit this part of the palace. It's been the family residence for the past 20 years of President and Mrs. Marcos. The Marcoses lived on the second floor, and a quick look inside reveals possible evidence of a sudden departure. In the middle of a large banquet table, uneaten portions of eggs, toast, and caviar. The beds are unmade, and the closets still full of dresses and racks of shoes. Also left behind, portraits of the former First Lady and of a younger President Marcos in an heroic pose. Today, an older, ailing Mr. Marcos began his exile in Hawaii. Now, there are new heroes in the Philippines, like former political prisoner Jaime Verdan, who will be going home later today. This is James Walker for Nightline in Manila.
The political prisoners are just the tip of the iceberg. When we come back, President Aquino's chief of staff charges that there are thousands of Filipinos who can never be released. They have simply disappeared and are believed to have been murdered.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Harris Corporation.
Slattery, the computer network's down. Call the service rep.
His ship docks in 6 weeks, sir.
6?
There's a typhoon in Osaka. We should have gone with Harris.
Who's Harris, and why should we go to Osaka with him?
Harris, the big high-technology company, with a nationwide service network for their information and communications systems.
Perfect. Call Harris, then find the idiot who chose this equipment.
That would be you, sir.
Mistakes happen, Slattery.
For your information, our name is Harris.
Civic hatchback. Fall in love without paying the price. This eagle could land in trouble. The high point he might decide to rest on could be dangerous. Unaware that 13,000 volts await him, he heads toward it and lands unharmed. Wooden platforms above power lines now keep him above danger. They were developed and put there by a lot of people whose work brings them to this remote area. Do people really reach that high to protect a natural wonder? People do.
H&R Block found Don and Flo Brown a tax refund of $939.
We couldn't have done it without you.
H&R Block found Lois Lesser $547.
I couldn't have done it without you.
We're pledged to finding you the biggest refund you're entitled to. This year, let H&R Block do your taxes. Get back everything you've got coming.
I couldn't have done it without you.
H&R Block, where more Americans find a bigger refund.
What can we find for you?
In Moscow, Peter Jennings continues reports from the 27th Party Congress. Plus, Ted Koppel in Manila on Aquino's rise to power. Tomorrow on ABC's World News Tonight.
The president's chief of staff here in the Philippines is referred to as the Little President. It has nothing to do with stature. The nickname is a reflection of the post's power. President Aquino yesterday named a civil rights lawyer to that job. He is a man who himself was imprisoned for 2 months under Marcos for participating in a public demonstration. His name, Joker Arroyo.
When the history of the Philippines is known, perhaps we would beat the record of Argentina in magnitude and the kind of torture this country has suffered during the Marcos government.
You're talking about, when you compare it to Argentina, you're talking about thousands of disappeared.
That's correct.
In the Philippines
yes,
also?
Yes.
Thousands.
Thousands. Nameless, faceless. They haven't surfaced. But I'm sure that the families of these victims have them listed down. And we are sure that in this government, many will surface. Just when we don't know. But we expect that.
You're raising what could be a huge problem for this government then. Because when you compare it to Argentina, you obviously better than I know what happened in Argentina. When you start looking into who was responsible, you suddenly find that the people who are responsible are sitting on your right, sitting on your left. They are now your colleagues in government.
The parallelism is apt. How far this problem can be solved, I don't know. It's fearsome. Precisely because you said they're not sitting next to us. We're not going to forget the past simply because we have to step on the toes of some of the higher-ups, no?
Even though those higher-ups brought you into power.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes. It's a strong yes. We have to do it.
You're in for some tough times.
No, sir. No, Ted, we won't. We won't. We survived it the past few days. We're going to survive the test again.
The question of Benigno Aquino's assassination. Marcos is gone. Nothing further is going to be pressed against him. But a lot of questions remain in your mind, I know.
Oh, yes. Yes. Not only in my mind, but in the people's mind.
Well, are the people going to have to put that on the shelf and forget about it?
Perhaps there could be a board of inquiry. Reopen the case. Perhaps it's easier to get witnesses now.
People will feel freer to talk.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
But let's assume now that you have a board of inquiry and that people feel a lot freer to talk. And fingers start pointing, because we come back again now to where we begin. They start pointing in the direction of some of the military men who are still in power. What are you going to do?
Let the chips fall. Why, they should be. It's what we fought for. Civilian supremacy. That the military should not again, ever, control this country. We will survive.
We also raised with Mr. Arroyo Washington's central strategic concern in the Philippines. Those two largest military bases outside the United States. The Naval Air Station at Subic Bay and Clark Air Force Base. President Aquino has said she will honor agreements which keep those bases in U.S. hands until 1991. But she offers no assurances beyond that date. The bases are the second largest employer in this country, offering jobs to 40,000 Filipinos. For the United States, they are crucially important. But their strategic value to the Philippines, as Arroyo made clear, is almost non-existent.
It's only four hours to Korea and Japan. 4 air hours and 5 sea days to Korea and Japan. 4 hours, air hours to Singapore. 8 hours to Diego Garcia. That's how much the United States needs those bases. There's no other place where you can transfer them contrary to whatever is being said in the United States.
What's going to happen with those bases?
As Ms. Aquino said, she'll respect it till 1991. But she'll keep her options open. So along those lines, talks will be reopened in 1991. So what happens in 1991, we don't know.
Well, what I guess I'm interested in is, to President Marcos, the equation seemed to be quite clear. While no money was actually paid for the bases, nevertheless, President Marcos regarded the foreign aid that was given as, in effect, being rental.
Oh, yes. What crimes were committed in the name of those bases, you know? United States aid given to the Philippines, military aid. And those military aid were used to buy U.S. weapons. Those U.S. weapons were used to kill our people. That is, in brief, is what U.S. aid was all about. Not to fight an external enemy, but fight the insurgency.
Oh, the insurgency.
Yes.
All right.
And U.S. weapons, U.S. money. And the United States government supported Mr. Marcos because Mr. Marcos said, in short, as long as you want the bases, you can have it. On a quid pro quo, just support me. So the United States continued supporting Marcos until the situation became so intolerable that he became a liability to the United States.
When we come back, I'll be talking with the new Vice President, Prime Minister, and Foreign Minister of the Philippines. One man holds all 3 jobs. His name, Salvador Laurel.
At AT&T, we know you never think about our torture tests.
Oh, it's just a phone.
Or about our extraordinary quality control.
I hear you fine, Mom. Australia's only halfway around the world.
Or even about how reliably we design things.
It still works. Who ever heard of a computer that works without air conditioning?
You can take everything we do for granted because we leave nothing to chance.
It's not a total loss. The phone still works.
For telephones, information systems, long-distance services, or computers, AT&T is the right choice.
As long as there are people who can afford perfection, BMW will continue to pursue it. The BMW 635 CSI.
Here's big news. Everything is on sale right now at Levitt's.
Oh, come on, not everything.
Everything, but that's only half the story.
Oh, keep talking. I do love to save money.
Then listen to this. You also make no interest or monthly payments until May.
My gosh, that's 3 months from now.
That's right. But hurry, this is a limited time offer.
When those that are kept apart finally come together, it's not just good, it's fantastic. McDonald's new McDLT.
His name's Lightning.
When you want a loan, most banks work at a slow trot. But someone can put you in the saddle.
Hop on.
The boss at Beneficial.
Hi, I'm Carol.
Our manager can get you a Beneficial credit line account, usually in 24 hours. The money you want for the things you want.
That was fast.
Fast as lightning. You bet.
Beneficial. Talk to the manager and you're talking to the boss.
Joining us now, the man I promised you a moment ago, the Vice President, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister of the new government here in the Philippines, Salvador Laurel. Which of the many titles are you going to go with?
Well, to you, Ted, just call me Toy.
You're very kind, but I think Mr. Vice President would be more appropriate under the circumstances. I want to get right to the subjects at hand. You've already begun, your administration has already begun releasing political prisoners.
Yes, yes.
Won't they all be released?
Eventually. It's just that not all can be released at the same time. Some of them we can't find. Where, you know, some of them have been kept in secret detention centers.
By whom?
By the outgoing regime. And
but who was actually doing it? The police? Or
well, this was under the personal supervision of the loyalists of Marcos, people under General Ver.
Now, you're raising a delicate question there, because while General Ver has gone, while President Marcos has gone, some of those loyalists
are still here.
Yes. Some of those loyalists are still in positions within the military of considerable power.
Yes, that's true.
Some of those loyalists, in fact, at the last minute, decided to come over and join you.
Yes.
How do you resolve this moral problem? It's also a practical problem.
It is correct. It is both a moral and a practical problem. But we solve this by meeting it on a case-to-case basis. As loyalists come to us, we look at him straight in the eye and determine whether he is sincere. And we believe in the human character that a man can always change for the better. And a man can repent or try to do better, change for the better. So we look at it that way.
You are showing enormous compassion for them. Mrs. Aquino is showing unbelievable compassion since her husband was assassinated. But you know there are going to be tens of thousands of family members of thousands of people who have simply disappeared over the last few years, who may not be quite as compassionate as you, who may not understand that you have within your own administration some of these men.
Initially, there will be some resistance. I suppose it could be compared to the days of the Civil War in the United States, when the Confederates and the Unionists were really, they couldn't really agree with each other. But time will correct that, and time heals all wounds, they say. I believe that in time they will see the wisdom of a policy of unification and reconciliation, because the objective is to stabilize the nation politically first before we can effect any economic recovery.
You mean none of these people, even if it turns out that they were torturers or murderers, will be put on trial?
No, I didn't say that. As a matter of fact, we have just created yesterday a commission, a presidential commission on human rights and good government. And this is now being headed by former Senator Jovito Salonga, one of our best legal minds and unquestionably a man of integrity, highly respected in the country. And he's looking into that, what cases ought to be prosecuted.
So it is possible
yes,
that some of the men who are in high positions in the military today, perhaps even some of the men who helped you come to power, may yet face prosecution.
Yes, depending on the findings of the Special Presidential Commission.
And that commission will be holding hearings?
Yes, and inquiries, investigations. And there are cases probably where cases will have to be filed.
Let me talk about the most famous case of all, the murder of Benigno Aquino.
Yes.
The original commission of inquiry found that there were a number of high-ranking military officers, men who were
26,
that they bore a responsibility for that assassination. But nothing happened.
Yes. Now, the people believe the verdict of the first commission, the Agrava board, and they do not believe the findings of the Sandigan, the second board. Now, basically, this is a matter which President Aquino will have to decide, because she is principally the aggrieved party here. The person killed was her husband. Now,
she has made public statements to the fact that she has no hatred, no vengeance in her heart, and that she's adopting a policy of reconciliation and magnanimity. She said, in defeat, defiance, but in victory, magnanimity.
That almost defies comprehension. You mean if it were determined, you knew, and she knew, that you had found the men who ordered the killing of her husband, nothing would be done?
Well, as far as Mrs. Aquino, the president, is concerned, she has already said that her number one suspect is President Marcos.
And he's gone, and she's not going to try and bring him back.
So if he's not around, and I don't think he's going to hound her. She's going to hound him around the world. I think her attitude is one of Christian forgiveness.
On that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with Vice President Laurel in just a moment.
New developments in the evolution of the luxury car. Today's luxury car has to be aerodynamic, trim, elegant. It has to handle a driver's car, but it still has to be luxurious, with obvious quality throughout. Advanced technology, with functional electronics that contribute to driver comfort, convenience, and safety. Who's offering luxury cars that deliver all that? The answer is the first name you think of when you think of luxury cars.
Best of all, it's a Cadillac.
Every day you rush, my lady. Every day you race.
A good night's sleep on Sealy's Best can help you experience your best.
You're pushed, you're pulled, but you do your best, and you do it with such grace.
Because Sealy Posturepedic is uniquely created to give you sheer comfort to ease the day's stress, you'll experience your best after you experience Sealy Posturepedic.
You do your best, and you do it with such grace.
Steady Rider.
One of the most popular shocks in America. Designed for thousands of miles of smooth, steady ride over all kinds of roads. It's Sears Steady Rider Shock Absorber. One more way we install confidence at Sears. Right now, buy Steady Rider RT shocks at the regular low price of $19.99 each and get free installation. But hurry, this sale is on now.
There's more for your life
at Sears.
I still can't believe my family's moving back to the States.
You know, they say that if you kiss in front of this fountain, you always come back.
I'll really miss you, Carlo.
Saying goodbye is never easy, but saying hello is. With AT&T, 10 minutes to Italy can average just 71 cents a minute. Only AT&T keeps you this close anywhere in the world. AT&T International Long-Distance Service.
Thursday on 2020, Bruce Springsteen rocks to the rescue of hometown factory workers.
What happens when the jobs go away and the people remain?
Thursday.
Tomorrow, more reaction to the president's defense speech. We'll hear how Tylenol's image is recovering from the tampering tragedy, plus Michael Caine on Good Morning America.
We are back once again at the home of the Vice President, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Salvador Laurel. You have been talking, I understand, over these past few hours about the reconstruction of the military command. Are you going to keep in power some of the people who were the top commanders of the Marcos military forces?
We will have a special commission.
Another commission?
Yes, because, well, it may not be a very a big one or a very... with a lot of fanfare. It will be a very quiet commission to find out who of the... Because we are trying to rid or purge the military of unfits or misfits. There have been a lot of abuses committed by the military, and yet there are a lot of good apples still. I would like to separate the rotten from the good apple.
Are you going to do it from the top down or the bottom up?
I think we'll have to do it simultaneously. Because it's a big order, but it has to be done. And I believe that General Fidel Ramos is in a position to do that.
Let me talk to you for a moment in your capacity as foreign minister. One of the most delicate issues is going to be those U.S. military bases. I know until 1991 everything is fine. What do your instincts tell you is going to happen 5 years from now?
I think unless the world situation changes, that the United States government will ask for an extension of the lease or the term of those bases. Under the present agreement, they are supposed to notify the Philippine government 1 year before 1991. That means in 1990, if they want to have it extended, they should notify the Philippine government.
And what will your reaction be to
as foreign minister, if I'm still foreign minister at that point, I would create a panel to discuss with the American counterpart the kind of agreement they have in mind. And my proposal is that any agreement reached between the two panels must be submitted to the Filipino people in a plebiscite. My objective is that if the agreement is good and acceptable to the Filipino people will ratify that agreement. And once ratified, it will be conducive to a more stable relationship between the two countries if an agreement of that nature is ratified by the people. Nobody can turn around anymore and say we don't want that agreement, or the people don't want it.
You have been most generous with your time. I thank you very much indeed for letting us come to your home. And I wish you the very, very best and good luck.
Thank you.
What is going on here in the Philippines in these first hectic hours of the Aquino administration is a government that got underway by jumpstart. There was no time for preparation. There have been no careful studies conducted in think tanks and then passed on to the technicians who ultimately make governments work. Overnight, literally overnight, one leadership left town and a collection of opposition leaders, themselves led by a self-described housewife, have been thrust into the middle of a whirlwind. For good or ill, Corazon Aquino has been handed a destiny she could never even have imagined only 2 or 3 short years ago. Tomorrow, we'll be coming to you again from the Philippines with what we hope will be an extraordinary broadcast. ABC News will have more on that during the day tomorrow. Tomorrow also, as he has done all this week, Peter Jennings will be reporting from Moscow on the 27th Soviet Party Congress, where things are...
It's contagious.
Cory Aquino, the politician.
I admit that I have no experience in cheating, stealing, lying, or assassinating political opponents.
Cory Aquino, the president.
I do not allow myself to be conquered, and I will do my very best to fight whatever prevents me from doing what I have set out to do.
Good evening. I'm Ted Koppel in Manila, and this is Nightline. She once described herself to a campaign audience as simply a housewife. But President Aquino has already shown that she is comfortable with power and knows how to use it. Our in-depth interview tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Manila, Ted Koppel.
Television is not most or even much of the time a profound medium. Cliches are often a convenient shorthand for us, and when a new public figure presents us with the sort of juicy cliche that Corazon Aquino bestowed on us a few months back, we seize it, relish it, and are reluctant to let go of it. She was the one who introduced herself as a woman, just a housewife, and we were unable to resist. We married it to another cliche and turned it into a battle between the housewife and the dictator. But now that she is president of the Philippines and Ferdinand Marcos is a tired old man in exile, we are obliged to re-examine the personality of this remarkable housewife. And that she will help us do a little later in this broadcast in what we think you will find is a rather revealing interview. But first, we have rewound the videotapes, and Nightline correspondent James Walker reminds us of the extraordinary evolution of Cory Aquino.
When she returned to the Philippines in 1983 to bury her husband, Corazon Aquino did not imagine that in just 2.5 years she would be president. Or did she?
When I first learned about all these people coming to our home to see Ninoy, I was just astounded by the numbers. And I said, this proves Ninoy did not die in vain.
Ninoy Aquino's assassination at Manila Airport set off the chain of events that led to the sudden defeat of his rival, Ferdinand Marcos, by his wife, Cory. But at first, she seemed an unlikely politician.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the press. Am I being heard? It is too high.
This is the press conference where she announced her candidacy 2.5 months ago.
The mere fact that many people are considering me a woman, just a housewife.
She certainly had no experience in the subtleties of international politics, and her first comment on U.S. bases in the Philippines got her into hot water.
We are for the removal of the bases and that we will not allow any other foreign bases to be established on our soil.
She had to backtrack on that statement, but not before she got into more trouble answering a question about the communist insurgency in the Philippines.
Oh, boy, you're really asking me a tough question. Anyway, from what people have told me, communism here is purely domestic and not dependent on foreign or international communism.
And she seemed overwhelmed by backroom political maneuvering. This statement came during negotiations to convince Doy Laurel to run as vice president.
This is the tiredest I've ever been in my life.
It was that image of a tired, weak woman that former President Marcos tried to exploit.
Housewife.
This is one of a series of commercials that ran on Marcos-controlled TV stations. The narrator, pretending to be Cory Aquino, is asking, "How can I handle the responsibility? It's too tough. This is a man's job."
Ang buhay ng milyong Pilipino,
So how did she prove it was a woman's job? Her brother-in-law, Paul Aquino.
I'll put it this way, she's very high IQ for having graduated mathematics. That's number one, you have to accept that. Number two, she is a very strong person internally, and she can disarm anybody.
And disarm them she did. The tremendous crowds came to see a Cory Aquino who had learned how to deliver a speech.
This woman of peace who stands before you today is claiming the people's due, the presidency.
A Cory Aquino who had learned how to handle the press.
Excuse me, can I request the photographers to please go down?
And a Cory Aquino who had learned how to confront the issues.
I am not a communist. I have never been a communist, and I do not intend to be a communist. Also, as far as the bases are concerned, I'd like to reiterate my stand on this, that I am respecting the basis agreement up to events which will occur between now and then. I would like to keep all of my options open.
And when she was being cheated out of her victory by massive voting fraud, she stood her ground for 10 difficult days.
So I hope to see all of you there tomorrow. Your resounding vote for me last February 7 compels me to accept the mantle of leadership. Therefore, I shall lead.
I suppose the assassination was the biggest trauma. If you can survive that and take it calmly, and I think that's what made her different from everybody else. That's what made her President Aquino.
I, Corazon Cojuanco Aquino, do solemnly swear.
It was a remarkable transition. Just 75 days for Cory Aquino to move from symbol of the martyred opposition to President of the Philippines. This is James Walker for Nightline in Manila.
When we come back, we'll meet the reluctant candidate who became president of 55 million Filipinos.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Sears.
This is the dawn.
The dawn of Discover.
The Discover card.
Very few things cost you nothing to get and pay you back every day. But now the Discover card does, with real dollar dividends and a savings plan that pays high money market rates.
A way to find that right tomorrow. The Discover card puts money in a home line.
From a member of Sears Financial Network. Look for more information in the mail or national magazines.
Do you want to buy a phone? It's cheaper than AT&T.
What you really need is cheap long distance.
And of course, our business systems are cheaper than AT&T.
Everyone's saying they're cheaper than AT&T, but nobody's saying they're better. All they can say is that they're cheaper, to which we say, you get what you pay for. Whether it's telephones, information systems, long-distance services, or computers, AT&T is the right choice.
The first big clearance of the year.
Northern California, the savings are yours during the biggest Nissan sales event of the year. To make room for the arrival of new models, your dealer is offering great deals on everything in stock, including 7.7 truck financing. Here's Sentra, already Nissan's lowest priced car. But with new models on the way, you could beat the price increase and save even more. So hurry for best selection.
The first big clearance of the year.
I don't mind working hard, but I'll tell you how I feel. I work an honest day, and I want an honest deal.
It's not always easy making ends meet when you're raising a family. So when so many young families come to Safeway, you know they're getting an honest deal.
Yeah, I work an honest day, and I want an honest deal.
Safeway, America's favorite food store.
Peter Jennings concludes his reports from Moscow on the 27th Party Congress and a Philadelphia man's new life in Siberia tomorrow on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
I do not seek vengeance. I demand justice not only for Ninoy, but for all the Filipinos who have been victimized by Marcos.
The image of a latter-day Joan of Arc, shy, reluctantly taking up a cause she had never sought, was certainly played for all it was worth. But listen now to President Aquino as she describes her painful path to political candidacy, and you can hardly doubt that initially, at least, she would gladly have passed the cup to anyone else.
At that time, Ted, all I knew I was going to do was to come back to Manila as soon as possible and to make sure that my husband would have a decent burial. That was my main concern at that time.
And then how, at some point or another, you must have gotten the feeling that people wanted you to become what, a symbol?
Well, soon after my husband's burial, people had come to me telling me that I should now, continue what he had started out to do. And I said, no, that's not the life for me, but I will help because this is what my husband lived and died for, to bring back democracy in our country. But I can assure you, I never imagined this present role that I am occupying now.
So tell me a little about the evolution, then, of your thinking. What happened? How did you come to begin to see yourself, then, as more of an activist than simply a symbol?
Well, I guess the rallies had a lot to do with that. The first big rally after my husband's funeral was on September 21, the anniversary of martial rule. So at that rally, I think there were about 500,000 people. And of course, they said I would be the last speaker. And I said, how long do I have to speak? And they said, oh, you can talk as long as you want. I remember telling Senator Diokno, look, they can take my place. It's all right. I can just sit here and maybe just lead in the pledge. And he said, no, Cory, you just have to say something. And I was just so nervous at that time. This was my first ever to speak before such a huge crowd. And I don't know how I got through that day.
No. Did it come to you one day as an inspiration? Did someone come to you and say, Cory, you could be president if you want to? How was that decision made?
Well, I think the first time it happened was maybe a year and a half ago when one of the assemblymen said that the only person who can unite the opposition is Cory Aquino. And you know what I told him when I saw him soon after that was printed in one of our alternative press. I said, will you please keep your mouth shut and don't ever say that again? And he was just laughing. And I said, you might think, it's a joke, but please don't even say it again. And one day after speaking before a sorority, they asked me, when will you ever announce if you will be a candidate or not? So finally I said, all right, if 1 million people will sign this draft Cory Aquino movement, and if Mr. Marcos will call for snap elections, then I will at least think, about being a candidate. Of course, at the back of my mind, I was sure that Mr. Marcos would never call for snap elections, because I thought, why should a man who still has 2 more years, he was not scheduled to run again until 1987, why should he want to be in a contest when there was no need to do that? And so when I heard one day, and when he announced it on American television that he had indeed called for snap elections, I said, oh, I'm a goner. And I asked how many people have signed, and when they said only 200,000, I said, well, thank goodness, I can still wait. But it seemed that was all that the people needed to know, and in such a short time, they got more than 1,200,000.
Let's talk about your personality a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, there is, and it's a wonderful image, a little bit shy, demure, will of iron, but very much kept behind the scenes. Did you change a lot? Once you decided, I get the sense that you're someone who takes a long time to make up her mind, but when you do, God help anyone who tries to get in your way. Have you always been that way?
Well, I've always been a strong person. I'm a very private person. But I guess when my husband was incarcerated, I knew I had to do certain things. I could no longer just keep in the background. Whereas before, my main occupation was making sure that our children would grow up to responsible citizens. But I would only campaign during election time, and I would only confine my campaigning to marketplaces and to factories. I never had to give any speeches. All I had to do was smile at people, shake hands with them, and ask them to vote for Ninoy Aquino.
The typical candidate's wife.
Yes,
That's a horrible job, isn't it?
It is, but a year after we got married, my husband was already in politics. I remember when my father would run for Congress, we didn't have to go out campaigning as my children had to do this time. So it's something very different now. And I'm fortunate in that my youngest daughter loves publicity, loves people. And
she's so shy. And
so this was great for her. In fact, she was the only one who was for this. My other daughters and my son were saying, why does it have to be you?
Why did it?
Because the only way we could defeat Mr. Marcos was if we only had one candidate.
It was like the successful operation in which the patient died. By most accounts, Mrs. Aquino won the election hands down. But President Marcos simply claimed that he had won and used his power to make the claim stick. When we come back, Mrs. Aquino gives us her behind-the-scenes account of the 4-day rebellion that gave her the presidency.
We're halfway through breakfast when my half-sister hands me the half and half and tells me about Color Tile's half-price sale. And I think, well, let's do the half-bath. Color Tile's just half a mile away, so we find this gorgeous half-price ceramic floor tile, half-price paint and wall coverings, half-price Armstrong sheet vinyl. We are going half bananas over Color Tile's half prices. I have half a mind to do the whole house. If you're even half thinking of fixing up the house, get to Color Tile's half-price sale. And hurry, it's about half over.
Half-price sale ends Sunday.
Some things look hard, but once you know the secret, they're easy. It's easy. Some people think financing a new car is hard, but it isn't. It's easy.
It's as easy as GMAC.
With GMAC, buying or leasing a new GM car or truck is easy. Ask your GM dealer and see how easy it is. Financing a new car may seem hard, but once you know the secret,
It's as easy as GMAC.
it's easy.
Books cost too much, so I opened Crown Books. Now you'll never have to pay full price again. We have over 10,000 books to choose from. Robert Ludlum's master spy Jason Bourne returns in The Bourne Supremacy, just $11.97, and Arthur Young's Tax Guide 1986, only $5.37, and it's tax deductible. Crown's one place you can't judge a book by its cover, price. So remember, if you paid full price, you didn't buy it at Crown Books.
Let's pretend you're a burger.
Huh?
First, we'll stick you in a box
Hey!
and put you under a heat lamp.
For how long?
Who knows? Now, wouldn't you rather be a Burrito Supreme from Taco Bell? It's made with only fresh ingredients and only after you order it, so it never sits around like some burgers.
Can I come out now? Hey! Hey!
Taco Bell, the cure for the common meal.
H&R Block found Fong Huan a tax refund of $583.
I couldn't have done it without you.
H&R Block found Mike Monacle $2,498.
Couldn't have done it without you.
We're pledged to finding you the biggest refund you're entitled to. This year, let H&R Block do your taxes. Get back everything you've got coming.
I couldn't have done it without you.
H&R Block, where more Americans find a bigger refund.
What can we find for you?
She says she can offer only her sincerity and honesty.
Justice is no longer possible.
Her advisors were pushing for dramatic, even violent confrontation with the Marcos forces. Mrs. Aquino said no. She called instead for a 3 to 6 month campaign of modest boycotts and peaceful demonstrations. Last Saturday, two men, the defense minister and the acting chief of staff of Philippine Armed Forces, took matters into their own hands.
I was in Cebu and we were at a rally. The rally started at 3 o'clock, and because we wanted it to end while it was still light, we finished at 5:30. And by the time we returned to our host's home, it must have been around 6 o'clock. But we had a friend with us who is a journalist, and she reported back to Manila, and she got the news that Mr. Enrile and General Ramos had indeed gone to Aguinaldo, and we were just, so amazing. None of us knew if he had been arrested or if he had gone there voluntarily. It wasn't until maybe an hour afterwards when we were finally able to get more news about him. Then I was talking to Minister Enrile at around, imagine this, around 9 o'clock. And I remember telling him that, Johnny, I'm sorry, the only thing I can do for you now is to offer you my prayers. And he said, well, Cory, that's the most important thing, or that's the only thing that counts now. And I said, oh my goodness, is he saying goodbye? Or
Were you hiding out at that point, or were there people on your staff or friends and advisors of yours who said, better lie low, this could get very nasty?
Well, that night, I think the men were rather tense, and they were saying, look, maybe we better wait a while. And I was just so sure that the sooner we could get back here, the better it would be.
What did you think was going to happen? I mean, did you believe that it might actually reach the point of civil war? I mean, here you had two of the most powerful military men in the country going up against the rest of the most powerful military men in the country.
But what was most amazing was the reports that I got, and even when I was in Cebu, that the people had just gone to these two camps to defend the military. This was the most amazing part, that for the first time, the civilians were out there defending the military. And so I asked how things were, and the women were telling, oh, we are just ready to, be a human barricade. And they were, in fact, some of them were telling me, we offered cigarettes to the soldiers who were in tanks, and we gave them flowers. And I said, so how did they react to this? Oh, they were very nice, and we shared whatever food we had. And then later on, they turned back. So the things that were happening, they were just so unbelievable. But I said, maybe this is what we have long been praying for. And I think it was Monday when I visited the Cardinal.
Cardinal Sin?
Sin, yes. And I told him, well, Your Eminence, you've long been telling me that not to worry and that the miracle is forthcoming. So is this it? And he said, yes, I think so, Cory, because the people are just out there, and we just have to continue to pray that the other side will not resort to violent measures.
Let's jump ahead to Tuesday. Certainly has to rank as one of the more remarkable days in your life. Where were you when you heard that President Marcos had left?
Well, I was at my sister's home, and Ambassador Bosworth had told me that the Marcoses were preparing to leave, in the afternoon, and that he would let me know once they had gotten to Clark Air Base. And he did let me know that. And later on, apparently there was a request from Mr. Marcos to stay longer in the Philippines from Clark. That he wanted to go to Paway, Ilocos Norte. That is his home province. And I asked first, is it because that he believes that his end will come soon, that he would like to die in his own home? And I was assured that it wasn't so. So I said, well, when Mr. Marcos has taken his rest, when he has gotten his sleep, then I have to strongly urge him to continue with his trip, because it is to the greater interest of the Filipino people that he leave the Philippines right away, so that tensions will ease and that we will be able to get back to normalcy at the earliest possible time.
If he dies, and he appears to be a very sick man, if he dies soon, while all the memories are still fresh, and his family said he wants to be buried in his homeland, what would you say?
If we had not gone through such critical days, maybe I could tell you right out now, Ted, sure, they can come back and they can bury him, but we cannot afford that kind of tension now. It's been too soon. Maybe at some future date they can come back, but right now it's out of the question. I cannot endanger more lives.
You're a curious mixture, if you'll permit my saying so, of charity and toughness.
I guess I would have to be that, Ted. I feel very Christian about many things, but there are some cases where I just have to hang tough, not for my sake, but where human lives may be in danger. I do not want to be responsible for any more human lives being lost, because that will forever be on my conscience.
They call it, quite simply, people power. Mrs. Aquino and her unlikely military allies speak of it still with genuine awe. But even people power requires leadership. And now that leadership is hers. When we come back, President Aquino talks about what she plans to do with that power.
What a great evening.
I hope it's not over yet.
Look, I had to tell you, right now, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm a married woman.
That's okay. I'm a married man.
Happily married?
Very happily.
Oh, me too.
Well, happy anniversary.
Stephen, it's beautiful.
An anniversary ring of fine quality diamonds, the gift that says you'd marry her all over again.
Every day you rush, my lady. Every day you race.
A good night's sleep on Sealy's Best can help you experience your best.
You're pushed, you're pulled, but you do your best, and you do it with such grace.
Because Sealy Posturepedic is uniquely created to give you sheer comfort to ease the day's stress, you'll experience your best after you experience Sealy Posturepedic.
You do your best, and you do it with such grace.
Pontiac!
Hey, Joe, look who's here.
Hey, Bob.
Hey,
Tony!
Joey.
What's this?
It's my new Sunbird GT. It's turbocharged.
Turbocharged?
Oh, he makes a little money, and now he's a big shot. Ah, it wasn't that much. How much?
Pontiac Sunbird, huh?
Well, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I'd have to drive it.
Sure you can handle it? Give me the keys.
We build excitement with Pontiac!
Norman, it's late.
I can't sleep. The office automation revolution is passing us by.
At 2 in the morning?
Technology never sleeps, Doris. I'll call Harris.
Who's Harris, Norman?
I'm Norman. Harris is the big high technology company. Office networks, computers, phone systems.
You're hyperventilating.
Satellite communications. They'll grow at my business. I'll be a mogul.
Come to bed.
But my empire, my dream.
My sleep.
For your information, our name is Harris.
30 years ago, an airline sponsored a contest on what jets would look like in the future. The entries could surprise you.
Tomorrow on ABC's World News This Morning.
Before Good Morning America.
What's it like to be a divorced mother without child custody? We'll find out tomorrow. Also, Molly Ringwald joins us and Carol O'Connor tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Mr. Marcos is determined to remain permanent dictator, come hell or high water. I am determined to stop him. I,
Corazon Cojuanco Aquino,
Corazon Cojuanco Aquino, fulfill my duties
as President of the Philippines.
as President of the Philippines.
I should warn our affiliates that we're going to run a little long again tonight. Cory Aquino's story, we felt, was worth telling in as much detail as she would give us. I raised with her the issue of assassination. It is no stranger to the Aquino family.
Long ago, I have lived my life according to what I believe I should do at the moment, and I'm so convinced that if it isn't my hour to go, then there's nothing anybody can do. On the other hand, if it is time for me to go, then no matter where I am, there's nothing I can do to avoid it. Of course, my security people are telling me now I do not have to be so daring and that I should take some precautions. They did want me to wear a bulletproof vest in our rally before elections. But unfortunately, the bulletproof vest they gave me was a man-sized vest, and it made me look so fat. And I said, no way are you going to make me wear this. Besides, it was so hot. And maybe I would have collapsed from the sheer weight of it and from the heat.
Here you are in this extraordinary position now of being allied with some of the men who were your bitterest enemies. What about the men who were responsible for planning your husband's assassination? Now, there was a commission. The commission implicated, what, 26 men?
Yes, 26.
What about them?
Well, of course, General Ver is gone now. As I said, this commission will undertake not only investigating all of these cases, but putting up the necessary processes to deal with these people who have with these people who have victimized not only Ninoy Aquino, but so many of our Filipinos.
But it is possible that these men will come to trial.
Yes, that is a most distinct possibility, because justice doesn't mean just mercy. I mean, we can temper justice with mercy, but justice has to be there.
There must be, at this early stage of the presidency, still a little bit of a sense of awe when the phone rings and I don't know who's called you. It's President Reagan. It's Gorbachev.
No, President Reagan hasn't called me.
He hasn't?
Senator Kennedy has called, and Prime Minister Gandhi has called. Yes, it is a thrill, and I think more than that, it's my children really, especially my youngest daughter, who's just loving all of this. In fact, the first time Senator Kennedy called, she said, oh, you know, Mom, this is it. This is the ultimate. And she just had to say a few lines to him. And so I asked Senator Kennedy to please talk to her. I had met his son, Ted Kennedy Jr., here during the campaign. And so he was very willing to talk to her.
What other foreign leaders? You say Prime Minister Gandhi called. Who else?
Well, I've received messages from the Pope, from Prime Minister Thatcher, from I guess almost all of the leaders of the leading European nations. I have to keep on reminding myself that is this still Cory Aquino, or it is.
It's really not just Cory Aquino anymore. It's President Aquino.
Yes, I suppose. I still can't get to say on the telephone that this is President Aquino. I just say when I'm on the phone, this is Cory Aquino.
At best, journalism is a form of instant history in which reality is inevitably distorted by the pressure of deadlines. But in a few weeks, Cory Aquino will have less trouble recognizing that she is the president. Indeed, we felt the value of this interview lay precisely in the fact that it captures a very fragile moment between two phases in a life that is destined to be very important indeed to the Philippine nation. Tomorrow, I'll be on my way back home, and Charles Gibson will be sitting in for me in Washington. Peter Jennings will report once more on World News Tonight from Moscow. That's our report for tonight. For all of us here at ABC News in Manila, I'm Ted Koppel. Good night.
Force Base, a family without a country considers its next move. U.S. Air Force guards, some with automatic weapons, surround the compound, beating the bushes, peering over seawalls, allowing Ferdinand Marcos to plan his future without worrying about his past.
When they left the Philippines, some in the Marcos party were wearing bulletproof vests, and guns were confiscated upon their arrival in Hawaii. Obviously, the deposed leader is very concerned about safety, and that is apparently why, according to officials, no one in the party has left this base.
The Secret Service is providing bodyguards for Marcos, officially designated a distinguished foreign visitor, but has told him protection cannot be adequately guaranteed elsewhere on the island without police assistance. Honolulu's mayor has refused that. So while political prisoners are being freed in the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos and 89 family and friends remain prisoners of their own protection. Reed Galen, NBC News, Oahu.
Marcos, his family and friends reportedly brought jewels, gold, and some $4 million in cash with them to Hawaii. At a news conference in Dallas this morning, Attorney General Ed Meese refused to comment on whether his office has begun an investigation of Marcos' wealth and how it was brought into the country with him, brought into Hawaii with him. Meanwhile, new Philippine President Aquino has sped up the release of political prisoners jailed during the Marcos regime. She says even communist sympathizers will be freed. In Manila, new joy this morning as many who were in exile when Marcos was in power returned home. Jim Bitterman reports.
At Manila Airport this morning, each arriving plane brought more Philippine exiles back home. People who could not live in their homeland so long as Ferdinand Marcos did. One of the best known arrived home this morning after leaving here 14 years ago, the day before Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law. Senator Raul Monglapos took up residence in the United States, founded the Movement for a Free Philippines, and was linked to groups that had actively tried to assassinate Marcos.
There is a new goddess in the pantheon of freedom, and the name of that goddess is Corazon Aquino.
But Monglapos and his friends were not the only ones celebrating today. Along the Wall Street of Manila, thousands turned out for a short victory parade.
It was the defection of the financial community that played a large part in Marcos' demise.
Today, everyone from Emma Natividad, who was turning a tidy trade in Aquino souvenirs, to the tycoons of the business district, were optimistically calculating how good the new government would be for the Philippines. It was optimism that has spread throughout the country. Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Manila.
And coming up next for you on Midday, a fatal train accident
held at 5 o'clock Pacific time. A newspaper in Honolulu is reporting today that Marcos and his family have decided to make Hawaii their new home. Well, one question that is sure to come up at tonight's news conference: did Marcos steal millions of dollars in cash when he fled the Philippines? Custom officials in Hawaii claim they found 22 crates with newly printed Philippine currency on a plane carrying Marcos's belongings. The currency is valued at $1,179,000. The new government in the Philippines says it will try to reclaim assets that Marcos may have stolen during his presidency. The new president of the Philippines today ordered the release of all political prisoners, even the chairman of the Communist Party. Cory even went against the advice of her own defense minister in releasing communist rebels. But the release of all political prisoners was one of her campaign promises. The prisoners will be let go within the next couple of days. Today in the Philippines, the celebration continues. Manila's financial district threw a ticker tape parade for their new president, and Richard Wagner was there.
The hardest thing to find in Manila today was a frown, and all the bang-bang was only firecrackers. While their heroine was dealing with affairs of state, thousands of Corazon Aquino's ecstatic supporters took to the streets of Manila's financial district to give the new president a ticker tape salute.
Very great. The best thing that happened to us. Victory.
The smiling throngs today put away thoughts of what surely must be on Cory Aquino's mind. A floundering economy, a communist insurgency, potential unrest in the military, and deep-seated corruption in government. No, today the people were celebrating with the joy of their victory still bright in their eyes.
We love Cory. We don't love Marcos.
We're free again.
Cory means democracy.
It's obvious Cory Aquino has won the hearts of millions of Filipinos, but will that support enable her to run a government in this troubled country? Best estimates are the answer to that question will come during her first 100 days in office. Richard Wagner, CBS News, Manila.
Money traders are expressing their confidence in the Aquino government. The currency closed up for the second day in a row. The leader of the Catholic Church in the Philippines is calling the peaceful transfer of power there a miracle. Cardinal Sin told CBS News this morning that the revolution was a triumph for all Filipinos.
For me, this is miraculous. And our revolution was a revolution of 3 days, but it was a festivity. People were there, and even the nuns and the children were the ones tapping the tanks with their rosary beads. This is something unique, huh?
Sin also said that most of the rebels fighting in the mountains are not communists, and he expects them to lay down their weapons now that the Aquino government has taken power. Many Filipinos came to the Bay Area to escape the Marcos regime. For them, the change of government is the end of a nightmare. But it is also the beginning of a long, hard struggle to rebuild their country. Doug Murphy met some last night who are going home to help.
It's a toast Henny Lopez has waited more than 13 years to make, and tonight as he celebrated with his family, he did, because Lopez is finally able to go home. The Lopez family was one of the richest in the Philippines until Marcos came to power. Henny himself was jailed in 1972, accused of conspiring to assassinate Marcos. He escaped from prison 9 years ago and fled to this country, and tonight he goes back.
I'm going home, and my people are free. Marcos is not there.
Lopez and his family say they knew this day would come. They never expected it this soon, but they are delighted that it's here.
Henny Lopez isn't alone in his dream. Other Filipinos meet tonight to discuss and plan what they can do for their homeland.
We are beginning to face the stark reality that there's a lot of things that would have to be done in our country.
From all walks of life they met tonight, architects, engineers, bankers, and medical workers, all Filipino Americans, all with the goal of rebuilding their homeland. Tony Garcia fled the Philippines nearly 15 years ago. He will go back soon to help put his country back on its feet.
As you know, under Marcos for 20 years, almost every institution in the Philippines has been devastated. The only thing left is the people.
The group, the Filipino Reconstruction Corps, says it will model its efforts after the Jews who flocked to Israel to build a homeland. Henny Lopez knows it will take that type of an effort, but he knows it can be done.
If we can exhibit the same kind of people power that the people exhibited in getting Mr. Marcos out, I don't think there's any question about our ability to get back
In less than 24 hours, Henny will be home to begin the work. He doesn't know what it will require, but he knows what he'll do first.
I want to kiss Philippine soil and say, thank you, God. I'm home.
In San Francisco, Doug Murphy, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
Other Bay Area Filipinos say they'll find ways to help their country while staying here. One way they intend to do it is by getting Filipino Americans elected to Congress and to the state legislature. Haiti wants its former president returned home to stand trial. The junta now in power there is asking the French government to extradite Jean-Claude Duvalier. There is no extradition treaty between the two countries, and it's not known whether France will honor the request. The man they call Baby Doc has been offered temporary asylum in France until he finds a country that will accept him. And still ahead on Eyewitness News, the driver who smashed 29 cars because he didn't like their color. Also, computers that are helping with cosmetic surgery. And Tahoe, it's back in business after cleaning up the mess from the...
Not to forget, these ideals and noble objectives which we will attain only through the peaceful unification of our people.
Ferdinand Marcos, who said that he would always remain the humble servant of the Philippine people. By the way, he said he was asked not to answer any questions. Back here at home, a bold experiment in...
The founder of the Philippines Party are in this group to be freed. Mrs. Aquino's military advisors warned against freeing communists, but said they would obey her order. The events that shook the Philippines continue today to be celebrated in Manila. But as NBC's Gary Cutley reports now, whether this can be turned into real change is one of the biggest problems for Corazon Aquino.
It was a victory parade today through Manila's business district, and the middle class was out in force. While the euphoria continued, Mrs. Aquino was on the verge of claiming that she heads a revolutionary government. That may be the only way for her to handle the levers of power in Parliament and the courts, which are packed with Marcos people. At the Supreme Court, there was a demonstration as lawyers demanded that the justices, headed by a Marcos schoolmate, step down. Since there is no legal way to force that, the pro-Aquino lawyers are building their case.
That we may be operating not under the Constitution, but precisely we are operating extra out of the Constitution, since this seems to be, from all appearances, a revolutionary government.
But at the Canlubang sugar plantation today, there was no sign of revolution. The wealthy family which owns it shows how even the elite is divided. One branch of the family supported Marcos and gave him this land for a country retreat. But another branch backs Corazon Aquino.
Right now, she's riding on a wave of goodwill. Now, how long she'll be able to sustain this largely depends on how she's able to start the process of change.
But there are some powerful people who may not want much change. Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile met with Special Envoy Philip Habib today. Enrile is one of the richest men in the Philippines, and he was one of the most powerful when he was martial law administrator under Marcos. What happened here in the Philippines this week was not an ideological revolution. It was a powerful urban middle-class rebellion against a fraternity brother who went too far for too long. Now Marcos is gone, and Mrs. Aquino will have to show whether she really can change things. Garrick Utley, NBC News in Manila.
Since he fled the Philippines 3 days ago, Ferdinand Marcos has made no public comment. He's remained holed up at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. But this evening, Marcos broke his silence, and NBC's George Lewis is in Honolulu.
Marcos appeared with his wife Imelda. He read a short statement to his fellow countrymen. He said he had planned to remain in the Philippines, but under pressure from President Reagan, left instead.
I need not explain to you the situation that developed when elements of the defense and military establishments took steps to take over governmental authority by force. This created the need to decide whether to eliminate them with military force or negotiate. This situation came to a point that although I had control of superior military power and several opportunities to employ this military power, the employment of such an overwhelming force, no matter how legitimate, would have resulted in the bloody carnage among innocent civilians. I have been called, perhaps immodestly, brave in my time, but brave as I may have been against foreign invaders, I have no heart to shed Filipino blood.
Marcos has been living at a guest house on Hickam Air Force Base, heavily guarded by Secret Service men and squads of air police. There is a 24-hour security patrol in the area around the house. High-intensity lights have been set up to illuminate the perimeter. A Secret Service armored limousine and chase car are standing by in case Marcos wants to go somewhere. The new Philippine government has hired a group of New York lawyers to try to recover the Marcos wealth. One of them estimates he took out between $10 and $30 billion. George Lewis, NBC News, Honolulu.
And when President Reagan was questioned about all of this today, he finished with an expletive that appeared to be directed at reporters. The questioning began during a photo op, a chance to take pictures of the president, and he plainly didn't want to talk about the reports of Marcos and his money.
There's no way for us to know anything about this. This is up to the government of the Philippines and the people of the Philippines.
Then, as reporters were being ushered out of the meeting, the president offered a final phrase.
Sons of bitches.
Later, when Mr. Reagan was leaving for Camp David, he tried to brush off the incident.
I thought it was one of you saying it about us.
And the president's press spokesman, Larry Speaks, said Mr. Reagan didn't recall saying that. But then Speaks added, if he said anything, he said, it's sunny and you're rich.
I love coffee. I love...
That we would have to leave for Guam instead.
Marcos did not talk about the millions of dollars he brought into the country. Customs officials found a fortune in currency, gold, and jewels aboard his plane.
The new Philippine government wants to recover Marcos' vast financial holdings in the United States. In New York alone, Marcos owns more than $300 million worth of real estate. To get it back, the Philippine government has hired a New York legal group. Marcos' opponents are also fighting him in another way, refusing to give the former president the last word today. Marcos and his entourage have been secluded in this compound at Hickam Air Force Base, guarded by armed American military men. An indication that Marcos is likely to live the rest of his life as a hunted man. Today, Marcos uttered his first public words since living in exile.
Although I had control of superior military power and several opportunities to employ this military power, the employment of such an overwhelming force, no matter how legitimate, would have resulted in the bloody carnage among innocent civilians.
Watching the news conference closely in our studio today, Alex Esclamado, publisher of the Philippine News in San Francisco and longtime rival of the former dictator.
If he was great, there would have been no need for him to be booted out like that. I think what happened to him is a negation of what his assertion is today, that he was great in his time. When did he not become great then? That forced the people to do what they did to him a few days ago.
Marcos did not permit any questions, but he wanted to make a place for himself in history.
I have been called, perhaps immodestly, brave in my time, but brave as I may have been against foreign invaders, I have no heart to shed Filipino blood.
I am sad that Marcos lost his place in history. He knew that there was no way that he could have retained the loyalty of his people if he kept on doing the foolish things he did.
Concern for the safety of Marcos apparently extends to the White House. President Reagan has sent a bulletproof Cadillac to Hawaii for Marcos' personal use.
During the Marcos reign, thousands of Filipinos fled government repression in their homeland. A huge number of them came right here to the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, after years in exile, many of those people are heading back home. News Center 4's political specialist Roland Post is in Manila tonight. He filed this report via News Star 4 satellite.
For the past 2 days, all the flights from the United States to the Philippines have brought back political exiles, men and women who either fled the Marcos government or were thrown out by it. Most of them were charged with subversion, rebellion, or other political crimes. The Aquino government has dropped all those charges, and they are now coming home as national heroes. One of the most famous, former Foreign Minister and Senator Raul Manlapos.
So I am a Filipino, and I'm proud to be back with you again. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
I asked Senator Manlapos if he thought the United States should grant sanctuary to Marcos.
He's already there, so that sort of becomes academic. It is, of course, a difficult problem. It is the lesser, it seemed to me, of many evils. If he had not been offered asylum, he might have been tempted to resist to the end, and that would have been more bloodshed.
Another former official to return was Congressman Justiano Montano. As he left the airport, he again looked like a politician back home, pressing the flesh. I think it's difficult for us as Americans to understand the real emotion these people had here today. We don't have political exiles. But these were political leaders coming back to their countries and their families for the first time in almost 15 years. In Manila, I'm Roland Post, political specialist, News Center 4.
Another group of Filipinos also hope to return home soon. They're not in exile, they are in jail, and today, President Corazon Aquino ordered the release of all political prisoners.
6 months ago, a sniper shot an East Bay woman as she drove home from work. Now
representative that we would have to leave for Guam instead.
It's been a long time since the things Ferdinand Marcos says have been taken with anything less than a grain of salt in the worldview, but what he said from Hawaiian exile today is getting plenty of attention. Good evening. It appeared that Marcos intended to stay in the Philippines in his old province, intended to tough it out, perhaps to use the military to do it. But today Marcos said President Reagan would not allow that and ordered him flown to Guam. The U.S. has not responded to those statements yet. As for the quick departure itself, Marcos said he chose to avoid bloodshed and insisted he had superior military power in the Philippines all along.
I have been called, perhaps immodestly, brave in my time, but brave as I may have been against foreign invaders, I have no heart to shed Filipino blood.
There are some other Marcos notes tonight. Sources say U.S. Customs found up to $30 million in cash and securities in the Marcos party luggage when they arrived in Hawaii. And there is one report that Customs found evidence of how money was actually transferred from U.S. foreign aid to private accounts. The evidence found in the personal bags of General Fabian Wehr. In any case, the Philippine government wants all the money back, and Customs is holding the luggage tonight. And in Stockholm, Sweden tonight, another world leader assassinated. Swedish Prime Minister...
Overwhelming force would have resulted in the bloody carnage among innocent civilians.
We'll focus on that story, plus we'll go live to Sweden for the latest on tonight's assassination of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Charles Gibson.
Olof Palme, the Prime Minister of Sweden, who is best known for his pacifist beliefs, was killed tonight, gunned down on a Stockholm street. Palme liked to boast that he could walk around Stockholm without bodyguards. He was alone with his wife tonight. They had just walked out of a movie when a man stepped forward and shot him twice at close range. Palme had been Prime Minister from 1969 to 76. He then regained power in Sweden in 1982. He was best known for his vehement opposition to American involvement in Vietnam. He once compared the U.S. bombing raids over North Vietnam to Nazi atrocities, but with equal vehemence he spoke out against the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968. Above all, Palme abhorred the arms race.
I think that both superpowers understand that this arms race is making them more and more unsafe, and that they will never be able to unleash this nuclear war without annihilating humankind as we know it.
The UN Secretary General Perez de Cuellar tonight said Palme's contribution to international peace would be his lasting legacy. Why was he killed? Not much is known about that. Standing by with us live in Stockholm is Lars Christensen, who writes for a Stockholm newspaper, Svenska Dagbladet, if I pronounced that correctly. But Mr. Christensen, what do we know so far about this assassination?
Well, in fact, we do know very little. There is nothing really confirmed about who could have done this. So, in fact, we do know very little.
Are there suspicions that it was politically motivated, or could it have been a random killing?
Well, there are lots of rumors all around the place, of course. But, well, I would doubt that this would be a sort of political assassination, really.
You would doubt that it's political?
Yes, I would. I would doubt it, yes.
I think it is so hard for Americans to understand that the top official of your government can go around without bodyguards, and indeed took pride in that. Is that something that he normally did, and have there not been incidents like this kind before?
Well, there have never been incidents of this kind before, as far as I know. And normally, the Swedish Prime Minister is followed by security men or bodyguards. But I know that Mr. Palme very often gave them a leave in the evenings when he wanted to be private together with his family, and he went to this movie with his wife.
And they were simply alone coming out of the movie when this occurred, and no one has
Yes.
been arrested, as I understand. Is that correct?
No one is arrested, no.
There is a report that this may have been done by Croatian nationalists, people from Yugoslavia, who are trying to bring about the separation of Croatia and the rest of Yugoslavia. Is there any validity? Do you put much credence in that report?
Well, I don't. I wouldn't believe in that report, really. It's only rumors, and I have that cable in front of me, in fact, and it says that there are some some sources within the Swedish police that should have told the Swedish news agency this. But this is not confirmed at all.
One other thing, Mr. Christensen, who will be the new Prime Minister of Sweden?
Well, it's a hard thing to say, really, because there is no vice chairman in the Social Democratic Party. So what will happen is that there will be a deputy prime minister in a sort of interregnum government for some days, and then the speaker have to choose another prime minister.
So the future political course in Sweden is still somewhat in question at this time.
Yes, it is.
All right.
And there is very little known about what they think in the Social Democratic Party. They are very shocked, as far as I understand.
All right, Lars Christensen from Svenska Dagbladet, thank you very much for joining us from Stockholm tonight.
Thank you. Nice being with you.
Thank you. In Hawaii tonight, former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos met with the press briefly for the first time since leaving his country. He made a short statement, he took no questions, and thus he left unanswered most of the questions about his actions in his last days as Philippine president.
President and Mrs. Ferdinand Marcos.
The U.S. government and the Air Force had an almost regal-looking setting for him to meet the press with reporters well back behind ropes. Marcos referred to the days of last weekend and early this week as a period of confusion. And he said Mrs. Aquino and her supporters were moving against him by force.
This created the need to decide whether to eliminate them with military force or negotiate. This situation came to a point that although I had control of superior military power and several opportunities to employ this military power, the employment of such an overwhelming force, no matter how legitimate, would have resulted in the bloody carnage among innocent civilians. And so knowing I could lose everything if I did not use military power, I chose, however, to use my authority over such military power to protect the Filipino people instead.
It is widely known Marcos told American officials he wanted to stay in the Philippines. Tonight, he said, when he left Manila, he still thought he could stay in the Philippines.
When I left Malacanang Palace, I decided to move to the northern Lawag City in the province of Ilocos Norte, my home province. However, shortly after arriving at Clark Air Force Base by helicopter, I was informed by President Reagan's direct representative that we would have to leave for Guam instead.
Now, said Marcos, he is looking for private quarters to rent or lease, and he will leave Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii as soon as such arrangements are made. Marcos' son says his father wants to stay in Hawaii, but fears he might not be safe there. Marcos tonight said nothing about the reported millions of dollars in cash, jewelry, and securities that he brought with him out of the country. Marcos claimed he had superior military force. That is debatable. But he certainly did not have a force that some consider greater, people power. And we'll look at that in a moment.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Ace Hardware.
Ace Paint, direct from our state-of-the-art factory, the quality you expect from Ace Hardware at a price that will surprise you. This month, Ace 5-Star Sealing White is Best Buy priced at just $5.97 a gallon. Goes on smooth and easy, spatter-resistant, and leaves a nice flat finish. Ace has all the painting supplies you'll need. Look for our March circular. This Ace Trim Brush and Easy Painter Roller, another Best Buy for only $2.22. So when it's painting time, remember, Ace is the painting place.
How do we know Ford is producing the highest quality cars and trucks designed and built in America?
Because a nationwide survey tells us so.
The survey covered owner-reported problems in areas like engines, electrical systems, brakes, starting and steering. And as a group, Lincoln's, Mercury's, and Ford cars and trucks were found to be the highest quality cars and trucks designed and built in America.
That's what happens when you make quality job one.
Quality is job one. The first big clearance of the year.
Northern California
California, the savings are yours during the biggest Nissan sales event of the year. Save by the numbers, 200SX, 300ZX, and what better way to haul your savings home than in a Nissan truck? Here's Sentra, already Nissan's lowest priced car. But with new models on the way, you could beat the price increase and save even more. This offer's limited, so hurry to your dealer now.
The first big clearance of the year.
We're very proud of Qantas. It's the airline of our country.
Australia. Of course, Australia's not a hop across the country. It's a hop